there is a moment that catches many people off guard, and it usually happens quietly rather than dramatically. Income goes up, sometimes by a meaningful amount, and yet the emotional experience of money barely changes. The paycheck is larger, the job title may look better, the effort may even feel more justified, but the underlying sensation is strangely familiar. There is still tension before bills are paid, still hesitation before checking an account balance, still that subtle feeling that money is arriving only to leave again. What makes this experience so disorienting is that it appears to violate common logic. If more money is coming in, then life should begin to feel looser, safer, and easier to manage. But for many people, the opposite lesson emerges. They earn more, but they do not feel richer. They are moving financially, but not gaining psychological distance from scarcity. To understand why income stops feeling like enough, it helps to separate money into two different realities. The first is arithmetic money, which lives on pay stubs, tax forms, budgets, and bank statements. The second is emotional money, which lives in the nervous system, in social comparison, in habit formation, and in the expectations that rise silently as life changes. Most people assume that when arithmetic money improves, emotional money will naturally improve with it. But that relationship is far less stable than it seems. An increase in income often changes not just what a person can buy, but what they now believe they must maintain. It shifts the reference point. The mind adapts quickly, and once adaptation occurs, what used to feel like progress begins to feel ordinary. Then ordinary becomes insufficient, and the cycle starts again. This is one of the central insights of behavioral economics. Human beings do not experience financial well-being in absolute terms very well. We experience it relatively, and usually against moving benchmarks. A person does not simply ask, consciously or unconsciously, how much am I earning? The deeper question is, how much room do I feel I have after meeting the standard of life that now feels normal to me? That standard is not fixed. It expands with environment, peer group, exposure. Convenience, and convenience in particular, is powerful because once friction is removed from life, people become reluctant to reintroduce it. A shorter commute, food delivered more often, a safer neighborhood, better childcare, a more reliable car, software subscriptions, cleaner clothing, better fitting furniture, improved healthcare access, and a higher baseline for leisure all begin to feel less like upgrades and more like necessities. Income rises, but the category of necessary spending quietly rises alongside it. This is why the feeling of not having enough often survives salary growth. What changed was not just the number, but the structure wrapped around the number. An extra $1,000 a month feels substantial in isolation, but not if $600 is absorbed by housing, $200 by transportation, $100 by recurring services, and the remainder by the inflation of small expectations that no longer feel optional. The money was real, but so was the expansion in fixed cost gravity. Fixed costs matter more than most people realize because they reduce flexibility before a month even begins. Once money is pre-committed, income becomes less of a resource and more of a pass-through mechanism. It arrives, fulfills obligations, and disappears, leaving behind the impression that earning more changed less than expected. There is also a psychological effect that makes this feel worse. When people earn more, they often expect the increase to create emotional relief immediately. If relief does not arrive, disappointment enters the picture, and disappointment is expensive in its own way because it changes how money is interpreted. Instead of seeing a higher income as partial progress inside a larger system, a person may begin to feel that even improvement is failing them. This can create a dangerous mental loop where the answer appears to be always earning still more, even when the real issue is that each increase is being matched by a rise in commitments, standards, and identity cost. The problem then stops being low income in the simple sense and becomes a moving target problem. The financial finish line keeps relocated. A useful way to see this is through a simple numerical example. Imagine someone earning $4,000 per month after tax. Their essential expenses total $3,100, leaving $800 of remaining capacity. That $800 is not just surplus cash. It is breathing room, error tolerance, future building ability, and emotional stability. Now imagine their income rises to $5,000 per month, which sounds like a major improvement. But suppose housing rises by $400 because they move closer to work, transportation rises by $150 because they finance a better car, food spending rises by $100 because time pressure leads to more convenience spending, subscriptions and services rise by $75, and general discretionary expectations rise by another $125. Income increased by $125, but expenses increased by $850. Their remaining capacity is now $950. Objectively, that is better, but psychologically, it may not feel transformational because their lifestyle is now more expensive to maintain and their margin improved only modestly relative to the size of the raise. That gap between gross improvement and felt improvement is one of the reasons higher earners can still feel financially strained. The issue is not necessarily that they are irrational or irresponsible. The issue is that humans are adaptive creatures living inside systems that reward adaptation upward. Employers may pay more because a role demands more availability, more committing, better presentation, more childcare support, more social participation, or residence in a higher cost area. In other words, income gains frequently come bundled with cost gains. The raise is not always pure. It often arrives attached to a new operating environment. Looking only at income without looking at the ecosystem around it creates a distorted picture. Then there is the problem of visibility. Large financial changes are noticeable, but many of the forces eroding their impact are subtle. A streaming subscription here, a delivery fee there, a modestly upgraded insurance plan, a few convenience purchases during busy weeks, a small habit of replacing rather than repairing, another recurring charge justified by productivity or comfort. None of these decisions seems large enough to explain persistent money pressure, which is precisely why they are powerful. Financial pressure is often not created by a single dramatic mistake, but by a layered accumulation of normal decisions that each make life slightly smoother in the present while making the monthly system more rigid in the future. Social comparison deepens the effect. People rarely evaluate income in a vacuum. They evaluate it against what peers appear to be doing, wearing, driving, renovating, traveling to, and talking about. If a higher income places someone in a social environment where the local definition of normal has also risen, then the raise may bring not satisfaction, but a new set of silent requirements. This is one reason professionals in expensive cities can feel poor on incomes that would feel comfortable elsewhere. The number itself is not meaningless, but the reference frame surrounding the number is doing much of the emotional work. Money anxiety is not purely personal. It is ecological. It depends on the standards, prices, and visible behaviors of the world a person inhabits. History offers a useful parallel here. In many periods of rising wages, households still reported stress because increases in nominal income were upset by inflation, urbanization, housing pressure, and shifts in what daily life required. As economies become more complex, participation itself becomes more expensive. It costs more to appear competent, stay connected, commute efficiently, educate children, maintain professional tools, and preserve time. Modern life has a high maintenance layer that previous generations often encountered differently or at lower scale. So when people say that their income used to feel like enough and no longer does, that statement is not always nostalgia or poor planning. Sometimes it is an accurate reading of how the economic system has changed the cost of normal functioning. Another important piece is the distinction between consumption and control. Many people think more income should make them feel wealthier because they can consume more. But the deeper emotional benefit of money is usually not consumption at all. It is control. It is the ability to absorb surprise, decline bad options, wait before making a decision, repair instead of replace in panic, leave a harmful environment, or take time to think. If an income increase raises visible consumption but does not materially increase control, then the emotional experience of wealth may remain weak. This is why someone with a moderate income and low fixed cost can feel more secure than someone earning far more, but carrying a heavy structure of obligations. Security is not only about how much comes in, it is about how much choice remains after the system is fed. That leads to an uncomfortable but clarifying truth. Many people are not underpaid only in the sense that they need a larger salary. They are underbuffered. They do not lack only income. They lack margin. Margin is what separates an inconvenience from a crisis. It is what allows a bill, delay, repair, or mistake to stay contained instead of spreading stress across an entire month. And margin is often much harder to build than income, because income increases are visible and socially rewarded, while margin often requires invisible restraints. It may involve resisting the impulse to convert every gain into a permanent expense. It may involve allowing life to look only slightly upgraded, even when earnings rise faster than appearances suggest they should. This is where identity enters the story. As income changes, people tend to revise their self-concept. They may feel they should now live a certain way, own certain things, occupy certain spaces, or stop doing things associated with an earlier stage of life. Some of this is natural, but identity-based spending is especially sticky because it no longer feels like spending. It feels like alignment. If someone believes their new income means they are now the kind of person who should live alone, drive a newer vehicle, dress more expensively, travel in a certain style, or outsource more inconvenience, then expenses stop being evaluated as trade-offs and start being defended as part of who they are. At that point, a raise does not create relief because it is immediately recruited into maintaining a new identity. The math of this can be surprisingly unforgiving. If every income increase is met by a proportional increase in recurring obligations, then the ratio of freedom to income does not improve much. A person can double earnings over time and still feel trapped if the monthly system expands to consume nearly everything available. The critical variable is not just income growth, but how much of each increase remains unconnected. That unconnected portion is what can become savings, debt reduction, investment capacity, or simply emotional calm. Without it, a higher income life can become a more expensive treadmill rather than a more stable platform. So why does your income not feel like enough anymore? In many cases, because enough is not a fixed number. It is a relationship between resources and expectations, between fixed costs and flexibility, between visible success and hidden maintenance, between social environment and personal thresholds, between what you earn and what your life now requires in order to keep functioning at its current level. If that relationship shifts in the wrong direction, more income can still leave the same emotional residue of scarcity. The most useful shift is not to become cynical about earning more, because higher income does matter. It can create options, reduce exposure to shocks, and improve long-term resilience. But its power depends on whether it produces margin rather than merely financing a more complex version of normal. The goal is not to freeze life permanently or reject every upgrade. It is to notice that relief comes less from the raw size of income than from the gap between what comes in and what must keep going out. When that gap widens, money begins to feel different, not because the number alone changed, but because the system changed. Seen this way, financial progress is not only about climbing to a higher earnings tier. It is also about protecting the psychological and mathematical distance between income and obligation. That distance is what turns money from a stream of transactions into a form of stability. And for many people, the reason income no longer feels like enough is not that they failed to move forward. It is that each step forward was accompanied by a quiet rewrite of what now feels necessary. Once you see that mechanism clearly, the question becomes less about chasing a number and more about deciding which parts of your financial life are truly serving you and which parts are simply consuming every raise before it has the chance to become peace.